Derek Young, K-State Online, covers Kansas State, joins us on 365 Sports. Derek, thank you very much for your time. Great to have you on the show. So we've discussed a lot of teams in the Big 12. You know that, but let's discuss K-State. They've been knocking on the door, man, and they have Avery Johnson back for another year with even more experience, and they're going to be good. What are the expectations? What's the minimum requirement to satisfy the K-State fan base?
It's, to be honest, yet they have to compete for a Big 12 championship. They have to probably make it to Arlington, or the fan base collectively, I think, would probably see it as a disappointment. That those are high stakes. Those are high expectations. It's a high bar to clear, but there's not a guarantee of a whole lot longer of a window when Avery Johnson is your quarterback. And if he comes and goes without any trophies or rings, I think it'll be seen as, underachieving. So they have to strike. The window is now. They won the Big 12 in 2022, and they were seen as still contenders in both 23 and 24, quite frankly, but just missed or had a couple games not go their way, the bounce not go their way, and ultimately they weren't competing in Arlington. But if they aren't competing in Arlington this year, the pressure and the chatter is going to amp up even further. I think that they have to get there. I think they will get there, but they don't have the easiest schedule to navigate like some of the other programs that they'll be competing with. So there are some hurdles to clear, but they got to get there, or there will be a lot of disappointment.
Avery Johnson looked to improve incrementally as a passer. I don't want to give him he's Peyton Manning all of a sudden, but he improved incrementally as a passer. Now, they maybe did not have all the weapons that they wanted at that position. They're down a very good running back this year, but that's never seemed to be a problem for them.
Right.
Is the wide receiver position improved enough so that he can keep improving?
It's a good question, because I agree that they probably weren't where they needed to be at wide receiver for him. He made his share of mistakes. That's Avery Johnson, but the receiver talent probably wasn't good enough yet to maybe compete at a Big 12 championship level like many would have wanted them to do. But he also went through his growing pains last year as well. The BYU game instantly comes to mind, where things really snowballed on him, and he made mistake after mistake when playing in probably a really, really tough environment for the first time in his college career as a starting quarterback. So the fact that maybe they weren't where they needed to be last year probably wasn't as limiting as it was that Avery just needed that experience and needed to go through those growing pains. You just don't come into college football or an instant success. That 99.9% of the time, that doesn't happen. You need to take your lumps, and I think Avery Johnson did, and I expect him to be incredibly better this year from a decision-making standpoint, where he needs to be a lot better, and from a footwork standpoint, where he needs to be a lot better in order to improve his accuracy. But from a receiver standpoint, which was the original question, I understand, I think they are better when it comes to their top three, the starters, so to speak, that they will count on. Jace Brown had more yards as a sophomore, receiving yards as a sophomore in Kansas State history than any receiver ever, more than Jordy Nelson, more than Tyler Lockett. So he's nothing to sneeze at. I think he's all Big 12 caliber. And I think Jerron Tibbs, the transfer from Purdue, will be all Big 12 caliber. And if you put people up to a lie detector test in the Veneer Football Family Complex in Manhattan, they might tell you that Jerron Tibbs is the best Kansas State wide receiver this year, even better than Jace Brown, which is a good thing to have both. And then Jaron Bradley would be your third guy that'll likely start for Kansas State. And for those that don't remember, there was a point when he was at Texas Tech where he was so good and so productive that he was a preseason all Big 12 first team selection at one point.
So, Derek, there are freak five-star freshmen that roll in and they make big impacts. Jeremiah Smith, for example. Yep. But you cover long enough and you realize freshmen take some time more often than not. What are we expecting from the highest-rated K-State signee ever in Lincoln Cure? I mean, it is as immediate contribution obviously on the table, and beyond that, what can you tell us about what the talk is and what the expectation is for this five-star tight end?
Pogo! Earn and save on everything. Join over 2 million people who use Pogo to save on their everyday finances while getting paid for their data. Earn rewards on every purchase seamlessly. Save on finances automatically. Make your data work for you. Take control of your data and how you monetize it. Get paid whenever your data or opinions are used for market research and personalized ads. Get paid for your data transparently. Automatically find ways to save money on bills, insurance, and bank fees. Download the Pogo app to get started at joinpogo.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And kids, they kind of went through this 2 years ago, even though he wasn't a projected starter, with Avery Johnson. Everybody wanted to see him, and ultimately Will Howard was your starting quarterback at the time. So there was some pressure taken off of him, and it probably will be for Lincoln Cure too. Everyone wants to talk about Lincoln Cure, 5-star tight end, highest signing ever for Kansas State, and I get that. And he will play probably in every game, barring injury. I think they will look for ways for him to make an impact and to get on the field. But something to keep in mind, and this will probably lend itself to a different usage for him in year one, is that Kansas State probably brings back the best tight end room collectively, even without him, in the entire Big 12. They had 4 different tight ends catch a touchdown last year, and all 4 returned. They led the nation in touchdown catches for all tight ends and as a team. So they were kind of stacked already at the tight end position. I can honestly say Garrett Oakley, who will probably be the number 1 tight end, there was teams like Texas that tried to lure him into the portal. So Kansas State was already pretty talented at tight end to begin with. But Lincoln Cure is so good, they won't be able to keep him off the field. I'm not saying he'll even have 20 catches this year. I'm not sure he'll even reach that mark. But they will find ways to get him on the field, maybe in a limited capacity each game. We'll see. And it might even be more as a wide receiver in the early stages than even as a tight end, just because his body type and his athleticism probably lends itself to that in the early stages.
So you mean like the way that some of these hybrid tight ends have worked in the NFL that are tight ends, but they're really not. They're more like, well, they're not slot receivers, but they do go down the seams and they can get down the field?
Yeah, like a flexed out tight end. Like we saw Georgia use Brock Bowers so many times that way. It could be of that nature for sure.
You cover recruiting quite a bit as part of your expertise as well. Where are they? K-State also has always been really good about development and finding the diamonds in the rough. That's kind of what they have to do, along with a lot of schools in the Big 12. Your thoughts about where they are?
Yeah, they are in a spot right now with high school recruiting in the class of 2026 where, from a fan standpoint, they're probably not ranked where fans would want them to be ranked. And they have a few guys that I think are probably underrated and probably should get a boost. And some of them are Texans, like offensive lineman Justin Morales, for example. I think he's got a chance to really shoot up the rankings. A defensive tackle from Oklahoma, Kingston Hall, I think he has a chance to shoot up the rankings. And maybe their team ranking looks a little bit better once those things come to fruition, and I think they will. But at the end of the day, it's interesting. It's a different era of college football, so it's probably a different conversation to have. But what I would say is, like, you have 3 different ways to basically invest financially, and that's what it is anymore, right? You're basically have a budget, you have a payroll, you're doling out salary, so to speak. You pay via the transfer portal, you pay via high school recruiting, and you pay via roster retention. Those are the 3 levers, the 3 arms, so to speak, of college football right now, and you have to pay to get those things. And what I will say is I think Kansas State is a little bit lesser to use right now on the high school front because they realize that they have a window here to win a Big 12 championship with Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards, Jace Brown, Toby Osunsami, defensive end, Austin Romaine at linebacker, VJ Payne at safety, the best players. A lot of their best players they spent on heavily to come back for this year. And then they invested in the transfer portal pretty heavily, especially at offensive line with, examples being JB Nelson, who could play right tackle, who came over from Penn State, George Fitzpatrick, who came from Ohio State, that will probably be your starting left tackle. So I think Kansas State right now, at least in the current time frame and structure that we are in, invested a lot heavier in the transfer portal and roster retention.
By the way, Derek, if you want that class of 26 to get better numbers, stars, et cetera, just have them commit to LSU, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, whatever. because the ratings go straight out the roof, right? That's kind of the way it is if you're a K-State, Iowa State, et cetera.
Yeah, that happens for sure. There's actually a 4-star receiver from Lubbock, Texas right now that is just announced the top 3 of Kansas State, Texas Tech, and Baylor. And I think K-State's got a chance for him, and that could definitely shift things as well.
Derek, I never worry about K-State on defense, ever. Like, I just know that, like, it's going to be good. I mean, and the way that you talk about it sounds like that's the case. Am I wrong to think that, not that it doesn't matter who's there, but Chris Kleiman, of course, Bill Snyder knew how to do this, that since they build their team with that maybe in mind first, that even a mediocre year is still going to be pretty good defense by modern standards?
I would say so. My only detractor from that statement would be I think the secondary hurt them last year for the first time in the Chris Kleiman era. Now, that's a small sample size, right? That happened once in 6 or 7 seasons under Chris Kleiman, and I doubt it happens again. And it happened even though they had 2 NFL draft picks in the secondary. But sometimes you're not as good as your best player. You're only as good as your worst player, and that worst player at times was too bad, right? So I think part of why they went from 7-1 to 8-4 last year was I don't think their secondary play was as good as it had been in prior years under Chris Kleiman. And on top of that, they had special teams issues out the wazoo. They couldn't snap the ball at times. They had long snapper that had the yips, so that was a problem. They had the worst, I think, average starting field position or field position difference in the entire Big 12. So those are issues that they wanted to remedy, and they thought they ran out of gas, which is probably a good conclusion to reach when you go from 7-1 to 8-4.
Mm-hmm. Derek, is there anything at Media Days next week before we let you go that you're just dying to ask? I mean, I know we're talking kind of in general and a little in depth as well, but you're obviously on that beat every day. There's a difference when you're getting it down to like the nuts and bolts. So what are you most interested in Frisco next week?
Yeah, who are going to be the cornerbacks, on the island that you're going to count on? Because you just lost Jacob Parrish to the NFL. Keenan Garber is gone. He graduated. So you have an entire different cornerback room, basically. So if we're talking about nuts and bolts, I think that's a big area that needs addressed, or at least is an area where we don't have the answers. So I think that there's something to that. And I wonder, do they get a little bit more pass happier now that Avery Johnson has a year under his belt? Now, maybe they don't tell us that anyways, even if we do ask. That those are typically things that are almost embargoed to an extent. I get that. But you have a new offensive coordinator, right? And Matt Wells, who's a quarterback coach. And to be honest, I think that they're going to benefit from the quarterback coach once again being the offensive coordinator. I know it can work in several different ways, but my preference of what I think works more efficiently, more effectively, is when your quarterback coach is the offensive coordinator rather than the offensive line coach.
Derek, thank you very much, man. Appreciate your time. Derek Young, K-State Online with us.